covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good afternoon, I'm Anaya Falarin Iman. Thank you for joining us here at GB News at Christmas. Coming up, as we've seen gas prices soar, are we facing a winter energy crisis and who is to blame? We'll debate this with Lois Perry from car26.org, Benny Pizer from Net Zero Watch and environmental researcher and writer Laurie Laybourne-Langton. We'll also hear about the composure and grace with which the Queen has dealt with a truly rotten year with her former chaplain, the Right Reverend Gavin Ashenden. And is it responsible to give pets as Christmas presents? We talked to pet welfare campaigner and the late Bruce Forsyth's daughter, Debbie Matthews. That's all to come after the news with Karen Roberts.
Thank you, Anaya. Here are your headlines. An armed intruder has been arrested in the grounds of Windsor Castle, where the Queen is celebrating Christmas. Police say the 19-year-old man didn't enter any buildings and there's no danger to the wider public. Meanwhile, in a moving Christmas Day message, the Queen reflected on the loss of her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. Her Majesty said after the death of her beloved Prince Philip in April, she's drawn great comfort from the warmth and affection in tributes from the country, the Commonwealth and around the world.
His sense of service, intellectual curiosity and capacity to squeeze fun out of any situation were all irrepressible. That mischievous, inquiring twinkle was as bright at the end as when I first set eyes on him. But life, of course, consists of final partings as well as first meetings. And as much as I and my family miss him, I know he would want us to enjoy Christmas.
Government scientific advisers say deaths from COVID could be reduced by up to 54% if new restrictions are introduced in the next few days. A new paper models the impact of banning indoor socialising and returning to the rule of 6 outdoors. It suggests the measures should run from the 28th of December through to late March. Ministers are expected to make a decision on whether to bring in new restrictions early next week. Meanwhile, people have been queuing up for vaccines, with staff and volunteers going up their festive holidays for the Jingle Jab campaign. The booster programme comes as COVID cases continue to climb. Daily infections hit a record 122,000 yesterday. Vaccines will also be administered on Boxing Day. Pope Francis has delivered his traditional Christmas Day message at the Vatican. He prayed for an end to the coronavirus pandemic and called for better dialogue to help resolve the world's conflicts. Only a few thousand people turned out for the annual event in St. Peter's Square, which is normally packed with tens of thousands of well-wishers. In other news, the world's most powerful telescope has been launched into space.
And liftoff.
Costing around £7 billion, the James Webb Space Telescope is 100 times more sensitive than its predecessor, the Hubble. Scientists believe the quest will transform our understanding of the universe. The telescope's expected to scan different life forms, and the UK Space Agency says it will look further back in time than ever before, to 400 million years after the Big Bang. Swimmers across the country have taken the plunge, braving the cold for traditional Christmas Day dips. Without wetsuits, they went into the sea at Brompton in Bangor, County Down, where the water temperature is estimated to be around 7 degrees. There were similar sights at Portobello Beach in Edinburgh and in the north-east of England at Tynemouth Beach. Well, that's your news update. I'll be back at 7 p.m. Now back to Anaya.
But the government will reportedly hold crunch talks with energy industry bosses on Monday in a bid to address rapidly rising wholesale prices for gas, after warnings that bills could skyrocket to £2,000 a year. Fears of runaway household bills in the new year have been mounting since rising gas prices began bankrupting suppliers in September. So are we facing a winter energy crisis, and who is to blame? Well, joining me now to discuss this is Lois Perry, a broadcaster and director of Car26, a climate campaign group, Benny Pizer, the director of Net Zero Watch, and Laurie Laybourne-Langton, an environmental policy researcher. Thank you all for joining me. Laurie, let me start with you. Are we in the midst of a crisis, and who is to blame?
We have experienced high prices for a while now, and it looks like those are set to increase, and that could have a pretty severe impact, particularly on the most vulnerable households in the country. For many people, I think it has been a crisis. Next year, if they go as high as we fear, and I think we definitely could describe the situation as being a crisis. Whose fault it is, it's a very complex picture. We've had massive spikes in demand that from economies bouncing back from the coronavirus impacts of the previous couple of years. We've had a colder winter, colder parts of the year, and then supply has been somewhat constrained as well. There have been problems with power plants. There have been the ongoing problems with the supply from Russia. So it's quite a complex picture when it comes to the fault. It's a sort of perfect storm of impacts that have come off the back of the pandemic itself.
And Benny, do you agree? I mean, the last few months we've heard so much about COP26 and transitioning to net zero, and so much about, solar and wind energy. But we do know when the wind isn't blowing, when the sun isn't shining, we're not able to use those sources. So who is really to blame? Do you agree?
Oh, it's entirely the fault of the government. Gas production in the UK has declined by 60% in the last 10 years. We're sitting on massive amounts of natural gas, but the government is essentially banning the development of shale gas. The gas prices in the US are a tenth of what they are here. So in other words, it's 10 times more expensive here. And simply because Boris is not willing to extract our own natural gas resources. He is so dogmatic about policies that he's essentially turning Britain over to to Russia's demands. It's crazy. We should use our own natural gas, but the government has to get a grip and realize that unless they bring down the cost of energy, they will essentially commit political suicide.
And Lois, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, COP26 was a very big event, and so much talk about fighting climate change and moving to net zero rapidly. Is some of these crippling energy prices something to do with the rush to net zero?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with every single word that Benny's just said. And, I think Laurie probably knows in his heart that Benny's absolutely right too. And it's very disingenuous for him to not even mention the rush to net zero just then. But, we're rushing towards green policies and net zero with no consultation on the public whatsoever. And the public want to be consulted. And my organisation, car26.org, did a poll during COP26, and the results said that 58% of people that expressed an opinion of the British public wanted to have a referendum on carbon net zero policies because in April, £2,000 a month is what the energy bills are going to be potentially as an average per household. Then it's going to get higher and higher and higher. And, we need to have a debate on these issues. We need to have a debate on the science, because anyone who disagrees with the science or wants to see scientists having a debate about these issues is accused of being a denier, in the same way that Brexiteers were used to be accused of being racist. The British public deserve a say. They really do. And they deserve to hear all of the science, not just the science, that fits the agenda of the people making huge money of carbon trading and other things like that. So, yeah, absolutely. Green policies have a huge amount to do with what's going on at the moment.
And Laurie, what's your response to that? Would you support a referendum on net zero?
And there was a general election in 2019, and the Conservative Party won a huge majority, and they had net zero in their manifesto. So I think the British public has kind of spoken on that front.
But Laurie,
we're getting a bit confused though with the number of...
2019 wasn't a net zero election. We know that was primarily a Brexit election. I mean, do you really think we've had a proper debate about net zero in this country?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you've got huge support for action on the climate crisis from across the public. Polling after polling shows that. Huge concern from people. But hang on a minute, we're getting a few things confused here. We're talking about gas prices, right? And one of the reasons why we're struggling under higher gas prices is because we're dependent upon that gas. The way we heat homes on the continent in Europe, for example, is there's much more electricity to heat those homes. The electricity can then be provided by renewable energy, and then you don't have to become
dependent. We want to be dependent on renewable energy at the moment. I think only 5% of our energy has been provided by renewables. There's been no wind and there's been no sun. So, we've been literally
so we have workarounds for this.
At the moment.
No, we wouldn't be. We have workarounds for these things, including for heating, for example, which is a lot of where people will bear the pain on these gas prices. We could insulate homes much better, and that should have been done many years ago. We could have
in the next couple of
exploited the gas. No, that should have happened. This is a government problem that homes were not insulated.
To deal with
more investment in renewables was not made.
We really do.
But Laurie,
no,
But also, in fact, Benny, isn't Laurie right there that ultimately this is the government's responsibility? You know, that they potentially could have predicted this. They haven't prepared for the reality that, we do need to be, some people would be arguing that we do need to be moving towards cleaner, greener energy, and they're not preparing for what's to come. So isn't it them that's ultimately responsible?
Well, it's a utopian dream. I mean, the government for the last 10, 15 years has dreamt about green energy, and so have all the mainstream parties. The reality is these renewable energies are a dead end. They don't work properly. They are unreliable. They are far too costly. Part of the cost on our energy bills is subsidies for these renewables. We will need natural gas for decades to come. That's generally agreed. So the question is, how do you bring down the cost of energy? How do you bring down the cost of natural gas? And unless the government get a grip and allow the UK to extract its own resources instead of relying on foreign countries and some dodgy countries, this problem will grow and grow. And the government is not, in my view, able to survive energy prices at that level. And many millions of people will struggle to keep their homes warm. There will be a huge outcry. Forget about net zero. Net zero is a pipe dream that lives or dies with energy prices. If energy prices continue to go up, then you can forget net zero. The public will go against it, no matter what was in the Conservative manifesto. Remember, the manifesto before the Conservatives promised the cheapest energy in Europe. That was also in the manifesto. So, manifestos, they come and go, but governments will live or die according to energy costs. And if people can't heat their homes, then you can forget this government or any other government. I mean, Labour is just as crazy about net zero, if not more so. So unless governments bring down the cost of energy, I'm afraid they will not survive contact with voters.
Laurie, I mean, that is a powerful argument in reality. Even if people have these dreams of net zero, the reality is that people need to heat their homes, and we don't want people freezing during the winter and having, ridiculously expensive energy bills. And also, a lot of the renewables are just not sufficient for the kinds of energy uses that we need right now. So in terms of being realistic and making sure that ordinary people are not, being crippled by this, don't we need to be thinking about natural gas and nuclear at the centre of our energy policy?
So I would definitely agree with what Benny's saying about higher energy prices being a huge risk for the government. I totally agree with that. Right now, I've got my phone up here, right? The National Grid, the system that sends energy around the country, has a website that shows you where our energy is coming from, right? Right now, about 2/3 of it is coming from renewable sources right now. And that shows you how we are being served in this country by renewable energy. The situation with gas is a slightly separate issue. Gas prices are high in this country because we buy gas off the world market, right? So if we spent the decade or so it would take to build a domestic fracking industry like the US has, right? Once we then have that gas, we're going to have to sell it on the world market to the highest bidder. It doesn't then guarantee that security of supply. Better insulation in the homes across the country, which are poorly insulated, and more investment in those renewables that are already giving us 2/3 of our energy is the right way to go. As you were saying, the government should have spotted this earlier on, and this is a...
Oh, we might have lost him. Lois, what's your response to some of the things that Laurie's just been saying?
Well, I would say maybe his electricity and internet is supplied by renewables, and that's why he might have just cut out. But that's just me being silly. But I'm not sure where he's getting his information from. But at least very recently, the amount of our energy that's been supplied by renewables has been very, very low indeed. And there was an article, I think it was in the Times recently, that said it has been as low as 5% in the last couple of weeks. So thank God we do still use fossil fuels. But my organisation, car26.org, is organising a series of debates with scientists that have opposing views to the consensus about climate change. And we are actually inviting scientists from the consensus side to debate with not our scientists, but other scientists, so that the public can really, really see that there are two sides to this argument. And when they have to make a decision about whether they put the heating on or whether they can feed their children, they can know that if they're making that decision and the governments are making decisions for them based on sound scientific evidence that they've seen both sides of. And at the moment, that just isn't the case. They've been told it's a fait accompli, and it really isn't fair. It really isn't.
And Benny, I mean, what do you say to people who would say, well, you know, time is running out, we're in an emergency, we all are going to have to tighten our belts and make some sacrifices if we're going to reach this target. Yeah. And this, what we're seeing, may well be just some of the consequences that we're going to have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that's exactly the argument that we are hearing every day. By the parties and by the newspapers and so on. In reality, of course, most of the world ignores this and focuses on their main priorities, and that is to raise, millions, billions of people out of poverty, to provide reliable energy, to provide affordable energy. That is at the core of most governments, not this government. This government takes, these climate issues more important than allowing people to heat their homes. So eventually, when you prioritize other things other than your own public and your own energy security, you'll get punished. So if you look at around the world, most people in Asia, in China, in India, most people in the developing world, they have other priorities. Their priority is to make sure that people have food to eat and have enough heat to warm them in the winter, and to have reliable energy, and not pay astronomical sums for energy and make people poorer and colder. Britain is one of the very, very few countries who prioritizes net zero over their own social and economic security, and energy security is being totally disregarded nowadays over the net zero issue. So yeah, there is a conflict between the political elites and the kind of green energy lobbies who want to prioritize net zero over any other concern in this country, and the concerns of millions of households and businesses who are suffering from high energy bills. And this conflict will eventually resolve itself. I have no doubt that at the end of the day, people will prioritize their economic well-being and their warmth and business survival over net zero. you have to be pragmatic. You have to look for alternatives that are affordable, that are reliable, and that can take the public with you. Net zero is at risk because of high energy prices. And unless you come up with a better solution, net zero is dead in the water because the public will not accept these astronomical costs.
Yeah, and Laurie, just quickly, very quickly, because we're running out of time, but final word to you, just to respond to some of the things that Benny said.
Yeah, and sorry I dropped out. The more we insulate homes, the more we roll out forms of electricity, of energy that are an alternative to fossil fuels, the more we will become energy independent. That process is continuing. It will lead to a better situation for the energy independence of this country. And when gas prices get higher into next year, people need to make sure they understand that that is a separate issue from the net zero debate that has been going on here, which I do not think is shared by many people across the country. They know that the costs of not dealing with the crisis, the climate crisis, are potentially globally catastrophic. So this, right now, we're all sitting here, those of you watching at home, 2/3 of your energy supply is coming from renewables, better insulated homes, and more of that supply will only do us a better thing into the future.
Well, thank you all for joining me. That was Laurie Laybourne-Langton, environmental policy researcher, Louise Perry, who's broadcaster and director of CAR26, the Climate Campaign Group, and Benny Pizer, the director of Net Zero Watch. Thank you all for joining me on this Christmas day. Coming up, I'll be speaking to the former chaplain to the Queen, Dr. Gavin Ashenden, to get her reaction to the Majesty's Christmas address. And we saw an extremely personal message during her speech earlier this afternoon. But first, here's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking rather wet across southern and central areas, and windy too. Let's take a look at the details. In Plymouth, the band of rain will gradually clear southwest across England this evening, giving a drier end to the day. In Devon and Cornwall, with some clear spells. Christmas Day will end on a wetter note across southeast England as heavy rain and brisk winds move in after dark, giving a lot of spray on the roads. After a cloudy and damp day in Wales, the rain will become heavier tonight and it will be windy too. It will be fairly mild for the time of year though. Pouring rain will also spread into the Midlands tonight, so take care if you're on the roads. There could be a little bit of snow over the Peak District too. As the rain pushes north tonight, it will turn to snow over the hills across northern England. Blizzard conditions may form as the wind strengthens too. After a fine Christmas day across Scotland, it will stay dry this evening with increasing amounts of cloud. It will be a chilly end to the day, especially in the wind. Northern Ireland will have a very wet end to the day as the heavy rain spreads in. There is a yellow rain warning in force across Armagh and County Down this morning. Overnight rain and hill snow will spread across northern England and Scotland with blizzards over the hills. Heavy rain showers will move into the south. And that is how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
The Queen made her annual traditional Christmas address earlier today. In a personal message, she reflected on the loss of her husband, Prince Philip, in April and the increasing disruption coronavirus has had on our lives. There were also moments of hope too. She spoke of the joy of Christmas with children and looked ahead to her Platinum Jubilee next year. Let's take a quick look back on some of the key moments.
Although it's a time of great happiness and good cheer for many, Christmas can be hard for those who have lost loved ones. This year especially, I understand why. But for me, in the months since the death of my beloved Philip, I have drawn great comfort from the warmth and affection of the many tributes to his life and work, from around the country, the Commonwealth, and the world. And for me and my family, even with one familiar laugh missing this year, there will be joy in Christmas, as we have the chance to reminisce and see anew the wonder of the festive season through the eyes of our young children, of whom we were delighted to welcome 4 more this year. They teach us all a lesson, just as the Christmas story does, that in the birth of a child there is a new dawn with endless potential. While COVID again means we can't celebrate quite as we may have wished, we can still enjoy the many happy traditions. Be it the singing of carols, as long as the tune is well known, decorating the tree, giving and receiving presents, or watching a favourite film where we already know the ending. It's no surprise that families so often treasure their Christmas routines.
Well, with me is Dr. Gavin Ashenden, former Anglican bishop and a former chaplain to the Queen. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. A hugely emotional speech from the Queen, far more personal than normal. What did you make of what she said?
I thought it was very beautiful. Isn't it wonderful the way she embodies the nation's great-grandmother so beautifully. She divided it into 3 parts, and each of them was very personal and special. She talked about Philip and the experience of bereavement and loss, and that will talk to so many people who have lost people they've loved this year to death, COVID or otherwise. She talked about accessing the inner child within us, and that's probably a very sensible challenge to us at this dark part of the year when a lot of people are finding it difficult to make ends meet and to manage. And then finally, she talked about Jesus and the way in which he had been the bedrock of her life and experience. So I thought there was something for all of us, and it was you can't fake integrity. She brings this wonderful integrity and humanity, which I think people are very grateful for.
Yes, and on the first part you said about, her speaking about loss. I mean, how much did Prince Philip mean to her?
Well, none of us know, of course, because to some extent this is an intimate and private relationship. But all of us understand what it is to love and be loved, and even to love and to have lost. So I think probably what she was talking about was our common experience of bereavement. And the fact is, it's quite difficult being a human being. We have these extraordinary, miraculous births of children that come from nowhere, and yet we love them so much. And then people we've known and loved and shared 70 years with die. It's not easy being a human being. And here she is with all the privileges that she enjoys as a monarch, saying, this is one of the hardest parts of being a human being. And we're all in it together. And then talking about love and faith, children and Christ, as offering us resources. And I think above all, a way of trying to find meaning in this conundrum of being a human being, where there's so much good and evil, happiness and tears, life and death.
And the Queen also spoke about her faith in her Christmas address and the importance of it in the meaning of Christmas. And I think it would be good if we just take a quick listen.
The birth of a child, there is a new dawn with endless potential. It is this simplicity of the Christmas story that makes it so universally appealing. Simple happenings that form the starting point of the life of Jesus, a man whose teachings have been handed down from generation to generation and have been the bedrock of my faith. His birth marked a new beginning. As the carol says, the hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight.
And Reverend, how important do you think faith is to the Queen, particularly at this time of year?
In the way she speaks to us, she makes it clear it's extremely important. In the Gospel of John, which is read out on Christmas Day, there's this wonderful phrase that Christ, the light's come into the world and darkness hasn't overcome it. She's known some pretty bad times, some tough times. She's the annus horribilis springs to mind, not just constitutionally, but personally. And so she, along with all of us, have to wonder sometimes, is there any meaning in life? How do we find hope? How, as she talked in that last phrase, do we manage our fears? And in the end, we either batten down and eat and drink and try and ignore it, which lasts only so long, or else we try and find a deeper meaning and go on a search for God. And what she's saying in very gentle and delicate code, so that she doesn't force it on anybody, is that she's found that meaning in Christ and the hope and love that he brings of forgiveness and the promise of eternal life are what's keeping her going, as indeed they keep many of us going.
And we heard in the clip also that she kind of gave a nod about coronavirus and the impact that's been having on many, if not all, of our lives. I mean, why do you think it was important for the Queen to address this particular matter?
Well, I think if she hadn't done, people would ask if she's being realistic or if she's been especially protected. All of us, all of our lives have been affected by coronavirus. I was looking forward to welcoming my daughter home for Christmas, and she's now sat in a bedsit hundreds of miles away all by herself. The Queen wanted to speak to all of us who've had our lives affected by illness, by loneliness, by isolation, by deprivation. So it was very important that she did do so. But the thing that made me laugh, actually, was when she put in that special bit about carols where you have to know the right tune. And she was obviously putting in a dig at some experience of some idiot changing the tune to something unfamiliar that we don't know and saying, look, we need some handholds in life, and the right tune to the right carol is one of them. I thought that was very funny, and it will have touched a number of people as well, alongside her solidarity in the face of COVID.
And Dr. Gavin Ashton, in terms of, she mentioned hope, and as we look towards the next year, I mean, what message do you think we need to maintain when it comes to hope and looking forward?
I think COVID's hit us all very badly indeed. It's done things to society we never guessed it would happen. Although theoretically we knew a pandemic was possible, the implications of this have been very problematic. I think that the people who've been talking about our mental health are right, entirely right, and we have to find ways of defending ourselves. And I'm afraid I think I would say this, wouldn't I? But I think in the end it comes by finding a deeper meaning for our humanity and finding a way so that we can live life without fear. We can find values of love and forgiveness and hope, and finding in God a companion, which of course is what Christ means. Christ came to be born so that we could put a face to God, put words and a voice to God. I think that one of the things that COVID does is to strip us back to essentials, and for many of us remind us that we need a faith, a real living faith, to make our way through the burdens and the difficulties that life can sometimes throw at us, as it has done this year.
Well, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon, Dr. Gavin Ashenden, former Anglican bishop and former chaplain to the Queen. A very powerful message that we should not be in fear and find a deeper meaning to our humanity. Well, after the break, I'll be joined by pet welfare campaigner and the late Bruce Forsyth's daughter, Debbie Matthews, as I ask, is it responsible to buy a pet for Christmas? We'll be back just after a moment.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Well, Christmas Day is the time for giving and bringing joy into the lives of our loved ones. Well, there's not much in this world that brings more joy than animals, and giving a home to a pet at Christmas is always going to put smiles on people's faces. But is it responsible? I'm delighted to be joined by animal welfare campaigner Debbie Matthews and the daughter of the late Bruce Forsyth. Debbie, thank you for joining me, and Merry Christmas to you. I mean, what do you think about people giving pets for Christmas? Do you think it's responsible?
Well, it's a difficult time to get a pet. We actually got Pepper a couple of days before Christmas, but then I'm a seasoned dog owner, so I know everything that goes with it. And also, it's a huge commitment to people. It's not just for Christmas. To catch a coin phrase, a dog is for life, and 14 years of work goes into this, and puppy training, toilet training, feeding, grooming. It's a long job, but worth every single second.
Mm. But as we mentioned in the introduction, it is something that, animals and pets are something that gives so much joy to people. So you can kind of understand why people want to give a cat or a dog as a pet, because it's almost hard to go wrong with that, such a lovely gift.
It is, but it's quite a personal choice as well. You've got to be careful about what breed you get, how much time you're going to be able to exercise that pet. Cats are obviously easier, but as you say, there will be a lot of people today who will be alone with their dogs or cats, and they're their only companion. You know, the reason they get up every day, they feed them, they walk them, they care for them, they love them, and the love you get back is just incredible. I highly recommend it.
And what advice do you have for getting pets for Christmas and just looking after animals in general?
Well, as I said, it is really important when you've got a puppy. You've got to socialise it. You don't want to have a dog that's reactive to other dogs. If you are in trouble, there's lots of help online to get the help, which is really important. And at any time with a pet, you know, phone up and get advice, get the help you need. It's a wonderful experience. I absolutely adore it and can't bear being without having a pet in my life. And this is our Pepper, by the way. The love you get back, it's just fantastic.
And what should people avoid? Because Christmas can be quite a dangerous time for pets. I mean, there's chocolates and gifts and all sorts of wrapping paper that maybe they'll mess about or even eat for some reason. I mean, do you have any advice on what people can avoid to make sure it's safe for the animals?
Yeah, Christmas time, well, there's so many dangers at Christmas time. All the decorations, the lights, the cables, children running around with food. Chocolate in particular for dogs is really dangerous. Also, mince pies and Christmas puddings and all those kind of things are really dangerous for animals. Poinsettia, plants, there's lots of plants that we suddenly use. Don't have any candles down low. I mean, there's so many things because your house is like a death trap, really, when you think at Christmas time. All the stuff you got out. When we got Pepper, she was 12 weeks old at Christmas when we got her 6 years ago. And we actually had a playpen for her that we could put her in while everybody was eating and we couldn't pay attention to her, just to keep her safe and peace of mind for us that we knew where she was. So it's really important.
And your father, Bruce Forsyth, was a huge animal lover, as we know. I mean, how important are animals to your family?
Well, I think the longest I've ever gone without having a pet is about 6 months. There's always been dogs and cats in our lives. I've never known a time without them, and I hate it if I haven't got it with me. But he was the one who brought dogs into my life. My first dog was a dog called Rusty, and he actually appeared on Sunday night at the London Palladium a couple of times. So. Lots of fond memories, lots of wonderful animals over these years.
And how have you been spending Christmas this year? I mean, we previously on this show just talked about the Queen's Christmas speech, and she talked a lot about loss in terms of Prince Philip, and then the impact of coronavirus on people, and then hope looking forward to next year. I mean, are some of these messages things that you've been thinking about? How have you been spending Christmas?
Well, I'm very lucky. I've got my daughter and her family here. One of my sisters is here as well. And after last year, it's just wonderful to have everybody back. We appreciate every moment we have together. It's a time for family and happiness and love and kindness. And it's been a wonderful Christmas. Thank goodness. We all deserve a good Christmas this year.
No, absolutely. And before we let you go, you've been strongly campaigning for mandatory microchipping in our pets. Could you just tell us a little bit more?
Well, we've been very successful. We've been campaigning for about 7 years now. But when my 2 dogs were stolen back in 2006, one of the first things I found out was that microchipping wasn't helping stolen dogs get back home because it wasn't compulsory to check microchips. So although we've got this year announced that the government are going to make pet theft as a specific offence in the pet theft reform campaign, microchipping is still left open. So it's still not a way for people to get their dogs back, and that's what people expect. So we will continue campaigning to make it compulsory for vets to check pets at first presentation, which is really important to get back sold on dogs.
And Debbie, what's your hopes with these issues around pets and your campaigning going into 2022?
Well, I think we've ended the note very well for 2021 on animal welfare, and the government are looking at different ways to protect our pets. And it's very important. There's so many homes with pets and dogs. I think there's over 10 million dogs in the UK and 9 million cats. I mean, it's huge. And they're very important. They're members of our family, and we expect there to be protection for us. So I am hopeful. I had a meeting with Lord Goldsmith just before Christmas last week, and he gets the problems that we're facing, and I think he's going to help us. So fingers crossed.
I mean, you mentioned that 2021 has been a relatively good year, but there has been some issues around, puppy farming and pet thefts. There's been some other challenges as well, hasn't there?
Yeah, well, pet theft. They've now made the announcement that they're going to make the legislation different. So dog thieves will now be facing a 5-year jail sentence, and that's a huge step. We've seen police really stepping up. We've seen police forces getting puppies back and dogs back. It's been fantastic to see. So there is a change in attitude, and that's what we need. And also to warn people to be careful. Never leave your dog unattended anywhere, especially outside a shop, in a car, in your own garden. That's the number one place dogs are taken from. It's warning people, making the public aware how to keep their dogs safe. And if you're aware and you understand the problems, then you should be okay.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me, Debbie Matthews, founder of Pets Get Scanning, pet theft reform campaigner and daughter of Bruce Forsyth. Thank you. Well, wow. We also have a package from our London reporter, Alice Porter. So let's have a quick look at that. After a year of reopening and closing down in some sectors again, has 2021 been a bad year for Britain's businesses? That's something firms in Doncaster are considering. It's one of 39 towns hoping to become a city in 2022 to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Kevin Larkin has been talking to businesses in the Yorkshire town which hopes to become a city.
It's been a year when Doncaster's motto has been useful, and it's an attitude shared by the town's leader.
Doncaster is still a great place to live, work and do business. We know our people are strong, dedicated, skilled, creative and resilient, and will do all they can to get back to where they need and want to be.
Doncaster, in a key Red Wall area of Yorkshire, has had some positive news this year, with a new cinema and a new library and museum opening. As businesses met before Christmas, they too were feeling positive.
We're primarily a mail order company. We've been absolutely rushed off our feet. So mentally, we're actually on the opposite side of the people that have been on furlough. So we've had no time off. We're just literally working. So it's for the business, it has been very good.
2021 has been absolutely amazing for our business. I think like a lot of businesses through COVID, we really took stock of what we were doing and how we were running, and we made changes to run more efficiently, and we've actually seen those rewards come through in 2021.
It's been an adventure. It's been a successful year. But if you would have asked us in March or April what type of year we would have had, we probably wouldn't have guessed that. But things came together. I think the business community really pulled together. I think the employees that we had worked incredibly hard to get us through it. And I think the programs that the government put in place did help.
But 2022 could be a bigger year as Doncaster bids for city status. It has a minster, a university. Now the hope is it will get the title to match and give Donny a boost.
I feel that it deserves it. There's so much inward investment and outward investment. I think the infrastructure's here, the rail network, the airport, obviously, which has got great scope. I generally think that its city status is what Doncaster deserves.
It will bring a lot more work, a lot more clout, and hopefully the government will need to then listen to the Doncaster Chamber of Commerce and other chambers in the north, because the levelling up process at the moment is a little bit, it depends which side of the levelling you are, because it's slightly uneven at the moment.
I think it would be absolutely amazing for the borough. We need to help raise the aspirations year on year of our people, our place, our workforces, and city status would just help us do that.
The new president of Doncaster Chamber says 2022 could be Doncaster's year.
2022 looks okay at the moment, but that's on the basis that we don't have any unnecessary lockdowns. I think there's a possibility that if we overreact and we go too hard and too early, irrespective of what the Chancellor does, government support is all well and good, but businesses want to do business and they perform better when they're allowed to get on with it.
While many of us will use the Christmas period to relax after a difficult year, there are fresh warnings that unpaid carers are at risk of burnout, with almost 2/3 having not had a break during the pandemic. Many have had to take on additional caring responsibilities for family members with little or no respite care. Our London reporter Alice Porter reports.
Over the last 2 years, we've clapped for carers, those in the NHS and those in our care homes. But there are more than 30 million unpaid carers across the UK, often working without any recognition. Vanessa Bowden is a full-time carer to her husband with MS and looks after her daughter with learning difficulties.
I haven't had a holiday for 8 years, I think it is now. I think it's about 8 years since I last went on holiday. Christmas Day, I'll probably be up around 4 a.m. to get my husband sorted, ready for coming down the stairs. And that's like an hour and a half's job to get him sorted. That's even before I get onto the stairs. And then it's a good 45 minutes to get him actually down the stairs.
James Townsend founded a company at the start of the pandemic, which provides online support for unpaid carers. They've reached 150,000 people, including Vanessa.
Most carers primarily are just exhausted. The real challenge for Christmas is to try and make sure that you're keeping going with the things that you need to do every day, whilst combining that with the regular challenges of Christmas as well. So we're finding that bringing carers together online give them an opportunity to share those challenges with other people who recognise them, but also to lift each other up, share a bit of humour. That's a really key way to get through the Christmas period.
The government published their long-awaited white paper on social care earlier in the month and say they're putting an extra £25 million into supporting unpaid carers. But opposition MPs believe it doesn't go far enough.
Unpaid carers have been pushed to the limit looking after the people they love. Almost half hadn't had a single break for 5 years, even before the pandemic struck. But I understand the additional funding in the white paper amounts to just £1.60 more for each unpaid carer a year. Families deserve so much better than this.
Carers are often in need of more financial support, and like Vanessa, many just want some appreciation.
Acknowledgement that we do 24 hours a day job. You know, we have to be on call 24 hours a day. We don't get that recognition.
That was Alice Porter, our London reporter, talking about some of the challenges that some carers are going through right now. Now we want to have a little bit of fun on the show this evening. I want to hear from you. What are you up to while sharing Christmas Day with us? Make sure, please, to send us an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Also send us a photo of your family celebrations. We'll give you a shout out in the next hour. Now, there's loads of brilliant shows across the GB News schedule. Our very own Gloria De Piero does fantastic work speaking to MPs and finding more about their personal lives.
When you get abuse on Twitter or wherever, does it ever make you stop and think, am I right? Because this is quite a barrage.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm one of these people who occasionally likes to stick my neck out with things. Some can say that's being a little populist or deliberately controversial. These are all things that I do genuinely believe in. And I always say that, you know, if you don't believe something, don't say it.
Has it ever become more than just social media abuse?
I think where it crossed the line for me is when they start making comments about your family or threats and so on. And I think after I made the comment about taking the knee, I had one particularly unpleasant message that was sent to me. And it said basically about kneeling on my children's necks until they were dead because they wanted me to feel that pain. I had to speak to my wife about that just to say, look, please don't get upset with this. Don't take it too personally. It's just idiots on a keyboard. It's not going to happen in real life. But I think sometimes people forget in terms of the security we have. My house, you know, it's been fitted with panic alarms and new locks and everything. And in my case, it was just a threat. The police dealt with it. They were great and so on. But it just does make you worry in future that something actually bad could happen.
You described Facebook as a morality-free zone.
That's been unkind to them that day, I think. Yeah. Facebook is a bit of a cult, let's be honest about it. I mean, it just appears to have a different agenda, in fact, than the other social media companies. And they have a huge impact on society, so therefore, they do need to engage properly with political process. I would like to see them take the approach that I do think some of the other ones are taking. We don't want to see society crumble. So therefore, what we need to do is we need to work to ensure that our platforms are still free, but at the same time, they still have at least an understanding of the social harms that can happen and proper processes in place in order to combat those. Facebook needs to come a long way towards that, and they're not doing it yet.
Lucy, would you like to lead your party one day?
I don't think I would. No, not really. I think the cost on one's actual life would just be far, far, far too great, to be honest. As women, we do weigh up those costs a lot more, the cost to our family, the cost to our lives. I think as women, we do generally, we wear that responsibility is weighted on us a lot more.
The Tory women seem to, I mean, come on, because they've done better. They've done better, considerably better than the Labour Party.
I know, but to be fair, there is I'm not being disparaging about it, but there is a sort of a different sort of culture with maybe people who are a bit posher about boarding schools and nannies and things like that. It's not quite the same as, you know, trying to pair up the socks and deal with the homework.
Loads more coming up after a break. Reports suggest a huge rise in anti-Semitic attacks. So has this year been the worst for anti-Semitism in the UK? We'll also hear how Homelessness charity in Leicester is making a huge difference in the city at an extremely difficult time of the year for rough sleepers. Thank you for joining me on this Christmas day here on GB News. I'll be back very shortly, but first, here's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking rather grey with outbreaks of rain in places. Let's now take a look at the details. It will be a grey and gloomy start in the southwest with some heavy showers at first on Boxing Day. Later on, it should turn drier and brighter in the afternoon. It will also be a grey and misty start in the southeast of England, with some outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Rain will be particularly heavy across East Anglia in the morning. Western parts of Wales will begin rather wet with heavy and persistent rain in the morning. It will be a mild day with temperatures starting the day in high single figures. Grey skies will also spread into northwest England with outbreaks of rain, but snow will fall across the Pennine. A yellow snow warning is in force until midday with strong winds too. Snow will fall across the Yorkshire Dales as well, and perhaps to lower levels for a time in the morning, giving some tricky driving conditions. Rain and hill snow will spread into southern Scotland through the morning, but it will be a dry, bright and frosty start in northern Scotland. After a wet Christmas Day in Northern Ireland, skies will still be cloudy on Boxing Day morning, with some outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Much of the country will hold on to grey skies through Boxing Day morning with rain at times. It will be windy for many, but the winds will gradually ease in the afternoon. And that is how the weather is shaping up tomorrow morning.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, Monday to Thursday from 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. We don't lecture to you or try to tell you what to think. We do a deep delve into a topic with views from across the range of debate, therefore leaving you, the viewer, to make up your own mind. Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, 4 till 6, Monday to Thursday. You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good evening and Merry Christmas from all of us here at GB News. I'm Anaya Flaren Iman. Coming up on this next hour, millions of Christians across the UK and around the world are celebrating Christmas today. But earlier this month, the Jewish community finished their Hanukkah celebrations. Worryingly, a new report says that there's been a rise in anti-Semitic attacks here in the UK. So we're asking, has anti-Semitism become more or less prevalent in 2021? I'll be speaking with Daily Star and former Jewish Telegraph journalist Adam Kaler. Also, while many families are able to celebrate their Christmas with their families indoors, many Brits are facing another year of homelessness. I'll be speaking with founder of the Help the Homeless Leicester, Arif Foraji, about what they've been doing to help those in this festive season that are most in need. And was 2021 the year of cancel culture? The comedian, writer and broadcaster Simon Evans will give us his take. But first, here's the news with Karen Roberts.
Thank you, Naya. These are your headlines. An armed intruder has been arrested in the grounds of Windsor Castle, where the Queen is celebrating Christmas. Police say the 19-year-old man didn't enter any buildings and there's no danger to the wider public. Meanwhile, in a moving Christmas Day message, the Queen reflected on the loss of her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. Her Majesty said after the death of her beloved Prince Philip in April, she's drawn great comfort from the warmth and affection in tributes from the country, the Commonwealth and around the world.
His sense of service, intellectual curiosity, and capacity to squeeze fun out of any situation were all irrepressible. That mischievous, inquiring twinkle was as bright at the end as when I first set eyes on him. But life, of course, consists of final partings as well as first meetings. And as much as I and my family miss him, I know he would want us to enjoy Christmas.
Government scientific advisers say deaths from COVID could be reduced by up to 54% if new restrictions are introduced in the next few days. A new paper models the impact of banning indoor socialising and returning to the rule of 6 outdoors. It suggests the measures should run from the 28th of December through to late March. Ministers are expected to make a decision on new restrictions in the next few days. Meanwhile, people have been queuing for vaccines, with staff and volunteers giving up their festive holidays for the Jingle Jab campaign. The booster programme comes as COVID cases continue to climb. Daily infections hit a record 122,000 yesterday. Vaccines will also be administered on Boxing Day. The world's most powerful telescope has been launched into space.
And liftoff.
Costing around £7 billion, the James Webb Space Telescope is 100 times more sensitive than its predecessor, the Hubble. Scientists believe the quest will transform our understanding of the universe. The telescope's expected to scan different life forms and will look further back in time than ever before.
This telescope that is now going to take us back in time. It's a time machine. It's going to take us back to the very beginnings of the universe.
After almost 100 days of activity, La Palma's volcano eruption has officially been declared over. It suddenly went quiet on December the 13th, but authorities held off giving the all clear until today to avoid raising false hope. Some 3,000 properties were destroyed, and lava now covers the equivalent of around 1,500 football pitches. Well, that's your news update. I'll be back at the top of the hour. Now back to Anaya.
Welcome back. While many people celebrated Christmas today, one community have recently concluded their festive celebrations. On the 6th of December, the Jewish community, both in Britain and across the world, ended their Hanukkah celebrations. And while Britain boasts a vibrant and diverse society comprising of people from all backgrounds, a report by the Community Security Trust says that anti-Semitic attacks rose by 49% in the first half of the year. It reported that 1,308 incidents between January and June, higher than any year prior. Maybe it should come as no surprise that earlier this month, a group of Jewish teenagers who were celebrating Hanukkah were targeted by a gang of men who were seen to be screaming "Free Palestine" before spitting at the privately hired bus carrying the youngsters at the part of the city tour. Let's take a look.
Come back when we're ready.
Just awful. Well, in another incident in November, the Israeli ambassador had to flee the London School of Economics after students protested her presence and refused to give her a platform, with the mob allegedly hunting down the leaders of the Debate Society for hosting the ambassador. So, is 2021 the worst year for anti-Semitic incidents in British history? I'm now joined by the Daily Star digital news team and former Jewish Telegraph journalist Adam Kaler. Thank you for joining me, Adam. Unfortunately, we're talking about something that isn't a very lovely subject, but what is your response to the shocking rise of anti-Semitic attacks here in the UK?
Yeah, it's officially the worst first half of the year ever recorded. Someone recently called it the summer of hate. The first half of the year also saw a lot of tensions in Israel, which always reacts badly on the Jewish community anywhere in the world. So in May of this year, CST actually recorded 639 anti-Semitic incidents in just 1 month. I think most of those were in the space of 2 weeks as well. You've also had the pandemic, which, when something as big as this happens, there are conspiracy theories, and where there's conspiracy theories, there's blame on Jews. So there's a lot of that that's gone on online as well. And CST also found that there's been 1,350 explicitly anti-Semitic tweets in English posted every day from the UK. So it's depressing, and it's never really improved. I mean, it's just got worse and worse year on year for as long as CST has been recording statistics, to be honest.
I mean, two of the incidents that we mentioned were related to the Israel-Palestinian conflict in some way. I mean, do you see that as a primary way or justification that people that perpetuate these ideas and attacks use? Or because historically we often understand it to be coming from more the extreme right. But is there different places that anti-Semitism seems to be sourced from now?
Yes and no. You've also got far-right kind of neo-Nazis who very often... there's a bit of an online phenomenon called Zoom bombing. So a lot of synagogues, not the Orthodox ones, but a lot of Reform synagogues and liberal synagogues have taken their services online. And very often, I think there was 13 in the first half of this year, those services were hit with Zoom bombing, where people were spamming with Heil Hitler and swastika images. And those, coupled with all the other incidents, the police don't seem to really take these very seriously. And they just, both left and right, think they can just get away with it. And, a few days ago, someone filmed a West Ham fan on the tube shouting "F the Jews," when they were on their way to a Tottenham game. That's not left or right hate. That's just out and out pure hatred of Jewish people, to be honest. And they've also got kind of casual anti-Semitism, where people don't realise what they say is anti-Semitism. Like earlier this year, Joey Barton, Bristol Rovers manager, said his players had a holocaust of a game. There's no real explanation for that. Yes, he apologised, but, you can't really come out with something like that and not have some kind of connotations behind it. And there's just been a stream of anti-Semitic incidents in everyday life throughout the year and for a very long time, to be honest.
I mean, why do you think that it seemingly doesn't seem to be taken as seriously as other forms of racism? I mean, you know, as a woman of African heritage, I know that if anyone says some of the things that you've just mentioned, that would be rightly an uproar, but it just seems to almost slip through the net, such disgusting statements and attacks. Why do you think this is the case? Because
anti-Semitism is the only hatred that punches above. It doesn't punch below. And a lot of people don't get that. And a lot of people will probably seem surprised with that statement as well. And it's anti-Semitic too. There's anti-Semitism behind that reason, because people think, oh, Jews, you know, traditionally well off and all this kind of stuff. So hatred towards them doesn't really matter in a way, and that's why the police don't really seem to take it seriously. And to be honest, if it wasn't for CST, who protect every single Jewish building and person in the community, anti-Semitism would probably be a lot worse, to be honest. We have that shield of CST protecting us, which I don't really think any other community has. All our schools have armed, well, some have armed, most have security guards outside of them. Jewish youth centres have security guards. You know, synagogues, every Shabbos, we've got volunteer security guards outside of them. I don't really think any other religion has that.
I mean, do you have any sense of why this year seems to be particularly prevalent, at almost record year?
Probably because people have been locked indoors with nothing better to do. And a lot of the incidents, as CST have found, have been online. And as we've come out to the back end of the year, as you've seen with the Hanukkah event and all these other kind of things, people are just letting rip because they've been trapped inside, or they've been able to do it behind the keyboard, and they've got so used to it that they think they can do it on the streets. And there really are no repercussions. You get the police tweeting out a picture saying, oh, does anyone know who this is? Can you help us find them? And that's about the extent of all they do to try and stop the incidents, but they don't. It's very rare that something actually happens.
And would you say the Jewish community feel safe in the UK?
Safer than they have in the past, but I know people are still contemplating leaving. I mean, a lot of people go to Israel, some people go to America, whatever, but I mean, it's not as if it's safer in America than it is here, to be honest. There's still anti-Semitism there. But I would say a lot of people feel safer than they used to, but not as safe as they should.
And how do we tackle this problem? I think Emmanuel Macron has, the French president has announced a crackdown on anti-Semitism. What do you think we could do here in the UK in order to really tackle this scourge in society?
Education. I don't think there's been a week where I've had somebody new that I've spoken to who's not said to me, I've never spoken to a Jewish person before. There are, believe it or not, a lot of this country who have never even met a Jewish person, and some of them think we have horns. So it really is down to education, starting from a very young age. You have in schools religious education where they get, 1 hour a week, 1 hour in a whole term learning about another religion. That's a way that can be looked at, and people can be educated better that actually Jewish people are pretty normal. We just want what everyone else wants in life, and we don't really want to face abuse, And
I mean, in the 2019 election, that the Labour Party were grappling with many reports and accusations of anti-Semitism. I mean, do you think the Labour Party have been able to move on from that shadow that really occupied them and took over much of their campaigning and the party over the last few years? I mean, where do you think they're at now with dealing with that issue?
They're in a much better place, but I'm not going to lie, it's not perfect. Keir Starmer's done a lot more than anyone else in that party ever did to get rid of anti-Semitism. But then there's organisations like the Good People at Labour Against Anti-Semitism who are reporting incidents still on a weekly basis of Labour members who are doing anti-Semitic things. But it's an easy way out to just say, oh, it's all Labour's fault. It's not. It's elsewhere in society. Labour's problem with it is not as much of a problem now as it used to be. They're dealing with it. But, all the parties had anti-Semitic incidents in it. When I was working at the Just Telegraph, we reported on Lib Dem incidents and Conservative Party incidents. The difference was they dealt with them quicker and they dealt with them more efficiently. Labour Party is getting there, but it's not quite there yet.
And obviously, defenders of Jeremy Corbyn would say that people some people were expressing anti-Zionism, and in the introduction we mentioned the Israeli ambassador that was hounded, and people would say that that's actually criticism of Zionism and her role within it, and that should not be conflated with anti-Semitism. What do you make of that kind of argument?
The vast, and I'll be careful the way I word this, the vast majority of British Jews will tell you that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And I can't really put it any plainer than that. It's almost becoming the new form of anti-Semitism, rather than just the old tropes of Jews are wealthy and Jews run the media. And people hide behind anti-Zionism, saying, oh, it's not anti-Semitism, we're just criticising the state of Israel. Well, the majority of them not. The majority of them actually wish that Israel didn't exist, which is in itself anti-Semitism, because it's the only Jewish state. Nobody turns around and says, oh, I wish there were no Muslim states, I wish there were no Christian states, that kind of thing. It's always about the Jewish state. So, yeah, anti-Zionism is very much the new anti-Semitism.
Mm. And as we look ahead to 2022, I mean, what would you like to see change? What would you hope for, what we can do as a society to make sure that anti-Semitism is reduced?
I would love social media companies to pull the finger out and actually deal with anti-Semitism finally. Jack Dorsey, on his way out the door, on his leaving tweet, I think the vast majority of responses to him were, well, maybe now that you've gone, hatred will actually get sorted out on this platform. That's a big driver of anti-Semitism these days. In terms of the real world, again, I would love to see a lot more done about education, get people into schools to talk about Jewish people in the real world and what we're actually like. And all the big parties, Labour, etc., and the Conservative Party to some extent, to communicate and deal with the Jewish community a lot better than it has done. It's all well and good having an annual Hanukkah party and reaching out to us and putting Twitter messages on to say Happy Rosh Hashanah. But you need to actually engage with us on a daily basis, like they do with other communities, but for some reason they don't as much do it with us.
Well, thank you for joining us, Adam Kaler, Daily Star and former Jewish Telegraph journalist. Thank you. Well, the Queen made her annual traditional Christmas address earlier today. In a personal message, she reflected on the loss of her husband, Prince Philip, in April, and the increasing disruption coronavirus has had on our lives. There were also moments of hope too. She spoke of the joy of Christmas with children and looked ahead to her Platinum Jubilee next year. My colleagues Ellie Costello and Bradley Harris earlier spoke to Grant Harold, former royal butler to Prince Charles, Prince William and Prince Harry.
As you said, it was very personal, this speech. I mean, the thing about the Queen's Christmas speech, she reflects on what's taken place in the nation, reflects on her family, and kind of shares good and bad news. And of course, this is very much been reflective, talking about the late Prince Philip, her husband. And it's quite interesting with the way she's kind of spoken there, because she's very much kind of obviously said that so many of us have lost loved ones in the past year, or in fact the last obviously few years, but she's obviously saying that she's now experienced that herself, losing her beloved husband. So I think it's quite special that she's actually kind of talked to us about it, and I'm sure there'll be people out there who have gone through the exact same this year and will appreciate the fact that she's actually kind of talking about her loss as well. Next year she's 96. Interestingly, a weird fact, that was her 69th broadcast. Next year's her 70th. She's even missed one Christmas broadcast. So, she's quite remarkable. I mean, most people retired 20, 30 years before, and she's still ongoing. And I think with the fact that she has obviously had poor health over the last few months, losing her husband, and with everything else going on, I think the nation in general kind of feel protective of her. I've noticed a lot of friends and family generally concerned and worried, and even friends and family that are not supporters of the royal family. They actually have a lot of admiration and respect for the Queen. And I think a lot of people, dare I say, I think even Republicans have said it as well. I think they respect her as a person and what she's done. And she is remarkable that she just doesn't want to stop. And, I hope I can be the same if I get to that age.
But there was no mention of Meghan and Harry. What are your thoughts on that? Are we reading too much into this?
difficult. I mean, some people say you can read too much into it. You can't. I mean, she doesn't mention every member of the royal family during this speech. And I know a few years ago it was obviously noted that when there was photographs placed around, they were obviously missing from those photographs. And I don't think it's so much kind of, I don't think there's kind of plan to it. I think it's quite simply that it's kind of been said that the future of the monarchy is obviously Prince Charles, the Duchess of Cornwall, and Prince William, his wife, the Duchess of Cambridge, and their children. And that is the future. I think without question there is going to be a slimmed down monarchy once, and I hope it's many years away, but once the Queen is no longer with us, I think it is going to change. And I think that's kind of what she's already doing. I think she's kind of showing us all this is the future of the monarchy. Prince Harry and his wife Duchess of Sussex and their children will always be part of the royal family. That's never going to change, but they're no longer working members. So there's members of the royal family across the country, across the world, who are there. They support the family and what they do, but they don't take an active role. And I think that's the reality going forward. Is that what William and Meghan, Duke and Duchess of Sussex, do themselves is going to be very separate and different to what the royal family are doing. But on saying that, it's interesting with the younger royals how they are kind of changing the monarchy. I mean, a lot of people say that you see that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex do kind of things that celebrities do. But then it was lovely last night watching the service where you saw the Duchess of Cambridge actually playing the piano. And so many people can't believe she's played the piano. Well, she's very good at playing the piano. And it's quite interesting. People are shocked that a future queen can play the piano. But, this is what the younger royals are doing.
Coming up, I'll meet the founder of Help the Homeless, Leicester, who will talk about what his charity has been doing to help those in need in this Christmas period. But first, here's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking rather grey with outbreaks of rain in places. Let's now take a look at the details. It will be a grey and gloomy start in the southwest with some heavy showers at first on Boxing Day. Later on it should turn drier and brighter in the afternoon. It will also be a grey and misty start in the southeast of England with some outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Rain will be particularly heavy across East Anglia in the morning. Western parts of Wales will begin rather wet with heavy and persistent rain in the morning. It will be a mild day with temperatures starting the day in high single figures. Grey skies will also spread into northwest England with outbreaks of rain, but snow will fall across the Pennine. A yellow snow warning is in force until midday with strong winds too. Snow will fall across the Yorkshire Dales as well, and perhaps to lower levels for a time in the morning, giving some tricky driving conditions. Rain and hill snow will spread into southern Scotland through the morning, but it will be a dry, bright and frosty start in northern Scotland. After a wet Christmas Day in Northern Ireland, skies will still be cloudy on Boxing Day morning, with some outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Much of the country will hold on to grey skies through Boxing Day morning with rain at times. It will be windy for many, but the winds will gradually ease in the afternoon. And that is how the weather is shaping up tomorrow morning.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Welcome back. Christmas is all about spending time with friends and family and enjoying each other's company. But the festive season isn't a time to cherish for everyone in the UK. Thankfully, the goodwill of volunteers and donations mean there's support out there for the vulnerable. In Leicester, a charity supporting the homeless has had a landmark year, joining forces with the City Council to offer support to rough sleepers. I'm delighted to be joined now by Arif Faraji from Help the Homeless Leicester. Thank you for joining me this evening, Arif. Firstly, Arif, you've been helping the homeless in Leicester for a number of years. Could you please tell us a little bit more about the work that you do and how it's grown in the area that you're in?
Hi. So it all started back in November 2014 when I took inspiration from a Facebook video of someone who was doing something very similar for my hometown, which is Bolton. And I've literally gone onto eBay, managed to win a bulk lots of clothing, 14 pairs of jeans and other T-shirts and clothing that I had, and went from the boot of my car to giving out clothing to people on the streets. And fast forward now 7 years, and we're a registered charity with employees, and we get funding from the local authority to help them kind of tackle rough sleepers and find solutions for them as well.
And you've now joined forces with the council, which is absolutely fantastic. I mean, could you tell us a bit more about the outreach work you've been doing with them and how important that's been?
It's very important because in Leicester, it's quite lucky that we've got a decent network of different organisations and charities that work alongside with the council to kind of ensure that no one is left out on the streets. There are a certain number of people that sometimes refuse help for whatever reason that may be, but generally when the public see rough sleepers and they report them via StreetLink or to the local authority, that gets either filtered down to us or the local authority, and we then try and find these people and find a solution straight away, and then a long-term solution as well, depending on their circumstances.
I mean, so what kind of support have you been offering people?
So the accommodation side of things is at the forefront, advocating suitable accommodation based on people's needs. And we've managed to, since 2018, we've managed to accommodate over 180 people, of which we've got a success rate of extended tenancies of over 86%. So that's a very, very successful project that we run, and that's probably the success of it is probably down to the support staff that we have, the intense support that we provide, helping people transition into the change from street homelessness to obviously moving into a tenancy. We kind of make that place into a home for them by helping to provide furniture, TVs, DVD players, that kind of stuff, so people aren't getting bored. So we do that. prior to the pandemic, we had a weekly meal on the market where we used to provide hot, fresh food. We were supported by different organisations, high street shops as well, that used to give us their food as well. So that became very popular. We used to have up to 180 people coming every week. When the pandemic happened, that had to stop for obvious reasons. So then we started to deliver food parcels to people, as well as fresh food to people by working with another charity. And that's still continuing today. We still give out basic essentials, your tea, coffee, sugar, cereals, UHT milk, that kind of stuff. People can drop into our HQ in the centre of Leicester, and we also deliver every Wednesday as well. We also provide hot, fresh food every Friday evening at 7:15, and that's a bit quieter than it was pre-pandemic, but slowly it's starting to pick up again.
And what do you think about the kind of local versus international or national charity dynamics? I mean, is local better because you kind of know the local area, you get to know people on a personal level, oftentimes the volunteers are local. I mean, what do you say? I mean, do you think local is better when it comes to charities and looking after people?
I wouldn't say better as such. There's some great organisations, charities out there, not just working nationally and locally, but also internationally as well. Unfortunately, there's people in all kinds of different circumstances, whether it's homelessness, addiction issues, people facing, cancer, life-threatening situations in the UK, even abroad. As long as, I guess, you're helping or assisting a charity that kind of aligns with your ethos and your thought process, then, you're already helping to make the world a better place. Charity does start at home, as the saying says. And at the time when I first started doing this, I feel that the number of homeless people on the streets was a lot higher than it is now. Whether that's down to the hard work that we've put in and the kind of networks that we've built up in the city. I can only speak for Leicester, not on a national scale, but there's definitely been a decrease in the number of rough sleepers on the streets of Leicester since we started, definitely.
Homeless people sometimes get a bit of a bad reputation. I mean, oftentimes people associate homelessness with addiction and drugs and, a chaotic lifestyle. I mean, what's your sense? Do you think that's accurate, or do you think there's much more to the story?
It goes a lot deeper than that, unfortunately. That is your typical stereotype that you see, that you face, that a homeless person is either got an addiction issue, that's why they're on the street. That does ring true for some people, but working in this, in the field that we do, we see different scenarios, different kind of ages of people, people coming out of, for example, prison to no fixed abode, people that maybe have a relationship breakdown and, they're getting kicked out of the house that they're living in. Maybe sometimes they've fallen into debt, lost a job, can't keep up with mortgage repayments, for example. That's also another issue, and that's probably another reason why people face homelessness. So you can't just pin it down to one specific reason or one specific scenario. It really is a whole, a wide spectrum of reasons why people end up either facing homeless or end up rough sleeping on the streets.
And how big a time of year is Christmas for the charity? I mean, would you say your services are stretched? I mean, particularly now, during the pandemic. I mean, what is the state of the charity and the services?
So at Christmas time we do get busier, especially with donations coming in. The public, schools, businesses, they really do like to get involved and give back at Christmas, and that's whether it's just food donations, monetary donations, even clothing, that kind of stuff. So we love it when other businesses and schools and colleges get involved, because it just kind of shows that the support that we're getting to help those that need the help. Yeah, that's always a busy time for us. But also with regards to the people that we're helping, our service users, we've continued to provide the food parcels, and those that are on the intense support scheme that we feel that really do need that extra support throughout this tough time. We're kind of doing welfare checks on them regularly, making sure that they're in a good state of mind, making sure they're not going hungry, that kind of stuff. There are meals that have been taking place today in a few different places that I know have kind of been running all day. So people have been encouraged to go down there and spend some time there, so they're not alone at Christmas. We had our meal like every Friday yesterday evening as well. We saw quite a few people, and we were chatting to them, making sure they're going to be okay over the next week or so. So yeah, it's just a matter of everyone just kind of banding together and making the most of the services and the facilities that are out there to make sure that they're not alone at Christmas, and kind of reach out to the help that is out there, really.
And I also hear that you're setting yourself a big challenge next year. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so we're hoping to raise some much needed funding for our charity. The work that we do is extremely costly as well. So to continue to keep the account topped up, so what we're going to be doing is riding on the bicycle from Leicester to Amsterdam in just 3 days. In the space of 72 hours, we're going to basically cover like 200 miles. And there's going to be 12 of us riding. And we're hoping to raise £50,000 at least for the charity, and we're also supporting Crohn's and Colitis UK by donating 20% of whatever we raise to them as well. So that'll be taking place in June next year, and all the information is on our website.
And that's just fantastic to hear. I mean, and finally, you're in a book produced by Captain Tom Moore's family, is that right?
Yeah, so unfortunately he's passed away now, but before he did, him and his daughter, they basically created a book called 100 Reasons to Hope, and well, I've got the book here actually, so that's all in all good bookshops and Amazon, etc. And I was lucky enough to be chosen to be in that book as a reason for hope, and that was curated by a lady called Danielle Brown, and the people chosen were chosen by Captain Sir Tom Moore and his daughter Hannah Ingram Moore as well. So yeah, that was you know, I'm quite proud to be in that book, and it's nice for the children as well, for my kids to kind of see it and say, look, Daddy's in that book, kind of thing at school. So it's great.
And just very quickly, Arif, I mean, how can people get hold of that book?
Yeah, as far as I know, it's available in all the major online retailers, Amazon, for example, and Waterstones, and as far as I know. So it will be available online if you do a Google search. So yeah, it's definitely there, definitely there.
Well, fantastic, and congratulations, and thank you for all of your amazing charitable work. That was Arif Faraji from Help the Homeless, Leicester. Amazing. Well, coming up, I'm asking, was 2021 the year of cancel culture? The comedian, writer and broadcaster Simon Evans will give his take. Don't go anywhere. I'll be back in just a moment.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
At GB News, we pride ourselves on never cancelling anyone for their opinion or view, but rather offering a platform for everyone to express their voice. 2021 has been an interesting year, with many famous celebrities and comedians finding themselves at the short end of the politically correct mob who have fought and often won in cancelling some of our favourite names. Billy Connolly said back in October that if he had tried to start his comedy career now, he would most likely be cancelled, whilst Dave Chappelle brushed off complaints from his detractors who tried to cancel his Netflix special over a joke involving J.K. Rowling and transgender people. And while some argue that cancel culture is a myth, a recent YouGov poll found that at least 57% of Brits say that they sometimes stop themselves expressing their views on political or social issues for fear of judgment or negative responses from others. So is cancel culture really as terrible as it's made out to be? And are comedians like Billy Connolly right that it's killing off comedy? Well, to discuss this, I'm happy to be joined by comedian and GB News headline presenter Simon Evans. Thank you so much for joining me this evening, Simon. I mean, is cancel culture a right-wing myth, as is often accused?
Yeah, well, I think any comedian who finds himself involved in a live show on Christmas Day, which is a treat and a privilege that was never even accorded, I think, to Morecambe and Wise in their heyday, can hardly complain too much about cancel culture. Clearly, there are some cracks in the pavement that the weeds can grow up through, but there's a little bit of a frost. There's a little bit of a closing in. On all sides, there's a little bit of a sense of being hemmed. There's a little bit more fear of transgression. There's a little bit more fear that if you do cross a line, or, I mean, a lot of comedians like to play with the edge. They like to dangle a toe, perhaps even dip a whole foot off the edge, or I suppose more accurately, sort of dangle the baby of the audience over the balcony, and threaten them with the fact that they might be about to plunge into some terribly unacceptable territory, and then snatch them back at the last minute. And that's where a lot of comedy comes from. That's where a lot of the great release comes from, that you play with the taboo, the unacceptable, and you tease an audience, or at least slightly. It's the sort of mode that I like to work in. And you explore the possibility of what it would feel like if you were about to go somewhere completely forbidden, but you snatch them back at the last minute. That's always been the way, and the edge has moved over the years, and I think a lot of people would probably agree there'd be consensus that many of the places where the edge used to reside in the 1970s and earlier, in particular, we've done well as a society to redraw some of those edges and to establish that you are not to tease people with the thought that you might be about to be absolutely disgracefully racist or sexist or homophobic in ways that just don't strike us as funny anymore. But I think a part of the problem with cancel culture is that it has created a sort of paranoia, a sort of Kafka-esque atmosphere where nobody is quite sure where the edge is anymore. And there is a sense that comedians in particular are playing it very safe, because they themselves feel comfortable with what they feel comfortable with, and they know where their friends feel comfortable, but they just aren't quite sure where everyone else currently thinks the edge might reside. It's less clear. There's less consensus within an audience, and certainly if you're on television or radio, where there are hundreds of thousands, sometimes even in these days of fractured media, you might have an audience of millions, and there will be a few people in there who will kick off in a big way if you transgress in their view.
I mean, but what do you say to people who say, well, Dave Chappelle, he had a Netflix special, he's got a huge platform, he's hardly being cancelled, whereas, the people that are the subject of his jokes are the ones actually being victimised. I mean, what do you say to that criticism?
Dave Chappelle certainly is not being cancelled, although people did attempt to cancel him, and it was quite comical watching them. Several employees at Netflix came out in protest against his recent show, which was simply called Closer, very much like Joy Division's great album. And he was protested against, and then there were counter-protesters who were saying, we're comedians and we like jokes, and they were attacked physically, and then the news networks tried to present it as if they had been the ones who were creating physical violence and elevating tensions, escalating the whole thing. It all became a bit of a playground for the culture wars, and then the dogs bark and so on, and it moves on. But I think what you have to remember with cancel culture is that there are people like Dave Chappelle, and also, as you mentioned earlier, Billy Connolly and John Cleese and Maureen Lipman, who either are too big to cancel, like Chappelle. Netflix stood by him for very simple, straightforward, green-coloured reasons. He creates a huge amount of market for them, and they are. I'm interested to see. Dave and I favour the same colour jacket. That's encouraging. I like the fact that he has this kind of support. He is a comedian with a huge hinterland of extraordinarily brave and what seemed at the time sometimes transgressive material then, which has been demonstrated to have been right on the money. So there's a kind of sense that he is really he is worth listening to. He has some form in terms of being a good analyst. But what's important is, even if you're Billy Connolly or John Cleese and you've effectively retired from the scene now, is that these people are trying to create or thaw the whole atmosphere in which they hope new young talent will emerge without feeling immediately that it's got to watch its step and cancel all its tweets and say anything that might be taken the wrong way and be, triple concerned that things could be put into different context and might sound bad. There are people like Russell Kane, for instance, who's a terrific comedian, very, very talented, very fast, very intelligent comedian. He said in a BBC report recently about this subject matter that he doesn't think cancel culture exists. It's just simply that the rules have changed, the rules of engagement have changed for the better, and we're no longer allowed to use hate speech in order to get a laugh, as he put it. And then he also mentioned 3 paragraphs later that he has installed software on his Twitter account which automatically deletes any tweet more than 6 months old in case it turns out to have been offensive. Well, I kind of feel you can't have it both ways. Unless he is saying, I used to be I used to use hate speech only 6 months ago in order to create laughs and create content and create a bit of a frisson among my listeners. I don't think he does mean that. I think what he means is things can be grabbed, taken out of context by people who don't mean you well, but simply want to leverage your error or your casual mistake in order to gain some sort of political traction. And that is not a healthy atmosphere for comedy to flourish in, I would say.
Well, in a slightly different subject, whose Christmas speech was better, Keir or Boris? Before you answer, let's have a quick look at what Boris said.
2 years of this pandemic, I can't say that we're through it. How can I? We must test ourselves and take extra care when meeting elderly or vulnerable relatives. We know that things remain difficult. But for millions of families up and down the country, I hope and believe that this Christmas is and will be significantly better than the last. We've been getting that vaccination that protects us and stops us infecting others. And that is to get that jab, whether it's your first or your second or your booster, so that next year's festivities are even better than this year's.
And here's Keir Starmer's.
But in the darkest of times, Christian values of kindness, of compassion and hope have shone through. Communities have come together to help one another. Key workers have saved countless lives. Armed service men and women, both here and abroad, have, as ever, played a huge part in protecting us all.
Oh, he's even got some music behind him. What do you make of that, Simon? Whose speech was better?
Well, it's disappointing to see neither of them have dressed up as I have for the occasion and come in full naval insignia. But it was quite interesting. Just in terms of comms messaging, there's obviously no substance to any of it, is there? There's no substance to anything that either of them say 99% of the time, and there certainly wasn't there. I think Boris Johnson has been guilty, if I'm honest, to a large degree, of the same sort of sin which people commit when they fail to campaign for the death penalty for certain crimes and instead hope that any perpetrator will be shivved in jail or will commit suicide rather than have their death on their own conscience. He has essentially encouraged people to deprive themselves of any kind of joy this Christmas, but is not willing to put the state on the line by actually sort of banning anything. And it's been quite a dismal affair, I think, for the hospitality industry. For the comedians, for most of us in comedy, just not that you asked, but Christmas ends usually about a week before Christmas. If, the season, the work, it starts to dry up. And so we just about limped over the finish line. But I feel very sorry for pubs and restaurants and so on who are struggling to make sense of what's going on at the moment, which is to say very little. But in terms of messaging and presentation there, one thing that struck me was that Keir Starmer looked more patriotic, didn't he? He had the Union Jacks, or the Union flag seemed to be hanging very closely to his left-hand side. His whole office was twinkling with what would have been more traditional sort of Conservative Party homeliness, and as you say, the carols in the background. That all seemed to be quite a kind of home guard kind of vibe, whereas Boris Johnson has drifted into technocracy, which is it's hard to imagine a mode in which he's less convincing than as a technocrat. If that was Tony Blair delivering that sort of speech, I think we'd probably buy it to some extent. But Johnson has seemed out of his depth for some time now, and obviously the whispering campaign has grown a lot louder lately. what can I say? Neither of them remotely convincing or impressive, and I would like to see the back of both of them. But I suspect that Johnson will not see this term out at the moment, and I suspect he's actually paddling for shore himself at the moment. I hear rumours which are unsubstantiated, I should emphasise, but that his own financial predicaments as well on the domestic front are hardly sustainable for another 12 months for a man who used to enjoy the lifestyle, the lavish salary afforded to him as a columnist for the Telegraph and so on. He's finding living on a PM salary a bit of a pinch as well. So on that front, at least, Keir Starmer is probably in a better situation.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, I mean, do you think that Boris Johnson might have to resign soon? There's been a lot of discussions and whispers about Tory regicide, bumbling up. I mean, what do you think?
Regicide is famously what the Tories are particularly good at, isn't it? They get rid of them as soon as there's the first grey hair appears. They're like the old medieval system where you have absolute rule until you show any sort of sign of weakness or mortality, and then you're done for. And it's obviously a very healthy system, and it served them very well over the years. I think they'll probably manage to make it a fairly smooth transition in this case. I don't think anyone will want to see him hounded out of office. Well, some people would, of course, any Labour supporter would, but I can't imagine within the Tory government at the moment, or the Tory HQ, would want to see that happen, because they have a large majority, and it would be a stupid thing to do to unsteady a ship that is that large and capable of that much stability. But who it will be, who will emerge, it's a very interesting question. I present a show called Headliners, as you might know, on GBNews a couple of nights a week, and our view was that Liz Truss is probably in the best position, that Rishi Sunak might again, if people wanted another technocrat, that would probably be the obvious choice. But Liz seems to be positioning herself very convincingly at the moment, and the Tories would love to see a proper Maggie reboot, because I don't think they really got one with Therese.
And just before we move on, I mean, could you tell us a bit about your outfit, Simon? I mean, what's it trying to tell us?
Well, this is how I dress when I'm not presenting Headliners. But Headliners, these are the only 2 hours of the week where I don't wear my full naval rank on my head. I think there's, somebody once said, in old age, women of a certain age, a dash of lipstick across the mouth is an act of kindness to others. In order to conceal decrepitude. I think once your hair starts to thin out and you have a bit of a grey beard, I feel the same way about a decent bit of headgear. Certainly at Christmas time, I think you want to jazz yourself up a bit. But I'm very proud of this jacket, which do you want to see? This is the nicest bit. Look at that.
Oh, lovely.
Isn't that? Yeah, that's posh, isn't it? We have been out to lunch today. It was my wife's sister's turn to do lunch, and rather than cook, she took us out to the pub. So I thought I ought to, make a bit of a splash, just in case I was recognised.
Well, on a slightly different subject, the Chinese city of Xi'an has gone into a full lockdown because they've detected 75 cases in a population of 13 million. That seems perfectly reasonable, doesn't it, Simon?
Well, it's interesting, that, isn't it? There are these two different mentalities, aren't they? And I suppose it depends about where you're at any given moment, that some people think just stamp it out, don't let it get any kind of momentum building up. Australia has been in that mode for a while. I think they got their first case in Western Australia recently, and everyone was sent down the mines and told not to re-emerge until they'd located it and exterminated it with extreme prejudice. I mean, obviously, it's to say that opportunity passed fairly early on in Britain would be an understatement. It's very hard to imagine living under those conditions. But Xi'an itself, of course, is where the terracotta warriors were found buried with the emperor. All those hundreds, I don't know, about 1,500 years ago, was it, or something, they were originally buried. That suggests a certain kind of culture in itself, that your entire army is buried with you, even if only in terracotta form. That is, the individual is sacrificed for the collective whole. And I don't see any great change in the mentality that drives China to ever greater success. It may well be that our leaders decide sooner or later that we could take a leaf out of their book, but I don't see it happening here for some time. I think we're getting towards the point where I really am quite optimistic. By this time next year, we will just be living in a constant soup of a gradually denaturing COVID that within 2 or 3 years will be the common cold, and part 4 or part 5, and China will still be living with a degree of authoritarian overreach, which its people have been long anaesthetised to.
Just on that same point, I mean, it's been reported that they've been essentially punishing officials for not preventing this COVID outbreak, and it's partly due to the upcoming Beijing Winter Olympics. I mean, there has been some calls from some quarters that we should be boycotting the Beijing Winter Olympics due to China's authoritarianism. I mean, do you agree?
Well, I'm not, I suppose, probably in the best position to say with certainty and defiance what I specifically think about the Olympics. Insofar as I don't really care about the Olympics, if I'm honest, it wouldn't be a great sacrifice for me. And I suppose the athletes need to be allowed to make some sort of decision on that front as well. The professional footballers who are going to Qatar are at least as hypocritical as any athlete who would go to Beijing. Qatar is at least as terrible a state as any that currently is hosting or likely to host a sporting event in the next few years. And our own footballers who go on such a high horse whenever they wear their rainbow laces and their Black Lives Matter shirts and are then plunging into a country which has literally killed hundreds of slaves in the building of its stadia and throws gay people off rooftops, because that's where the money is. I mean, that is utterly sickening. So the Olympics, by comparison, seems like a fairly sort of tame affair. But yes, I'll be honest with you, I've said on Twitter, I'm on record as saying that if you ever wondered how you would have responded to the rise of the Nazis in Germany in the mid-30s, then your attitude towards China at the moment will probably be a fairly good indication. Because there is very little to choose between them in terms of their ruthlessness and their attitude towards ethnic minorities and problematic religions and ideologies. That's hardly controversial, except that we're actually living through it, so it's sometimes difficult to see it for what it is. I believe that Biden's administration, who I'm not a huge fan of, but I think they have tried to draft some fairly stern legislation, putting it into the corporate court, as it were, to make sure that they have nothing in their supply chain that comes from the Uyghur region, in order to create some sort of pushback against the utterly terrible, conditions under which the Uyghur people are kept, and indeed sometimes not kept alive. I think that kind of degree of international diplomacy is long overdue. I don't think it's always necessarily fair to expect athletes who train incredibly hard and with extraordinary determination and in quite a limited window of the peak of their natural ability to sacrifice, one of the great sporting events of their careers. It's for all of us to stop buying cheap electrical goods, to be honest, before you expect athletes to give up their running.
Well, thank you. Strong stuff. Simon Evans, comedian and GBNews presenter.
I'd like to emphasise that my hat was hand-stitched by ladies in Norfolk, obviously.
Comedian and GBNews presenter of Headliners, Simon Evans, thank you for joining us on this Christmas evening. Coming up, what if you were born on Christmas Day? Do you have a split celebration? How do you celebrate? I'll be speaking to behavioural psychologist Jo Hemmings about how she not only has to celebrate her birthday on Christmas, but also shares it with her son. All that coming up. But first, here's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking rather grey with outbreaks of rain in places. Let's now take a look at the details. It will be a grey and gloomy start in the southwest with some heavy showers at first on Boxing Day. Later on, it should turn drier and brighter in the afternoon. It will also be a grey and misty start in the southeast of England, with some outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Rain will be particularly heavy across East Anglia in the morning. Western parts of Wales will begin rather wet with heavy and persistent rain in the morning. It will be a mild day with temperatures starting the day in high single figures. Grey skies will also spread into northwest England with outbreaks of rain, but snow will fall across the Pennine. A yellow snow warning is in force until midday with strong winds too. Snow will fall across the Yorkshire Dales as well, and perhaps to lower levels for a time in the morning, giving some tricky driving conditions. Rain and hill snow will spread into southern Scotland through the morning, but it will be a dry, bright and frosty start in northern Scotland. After a wet Christmas Day in Northern Ireland, skies will still be cloudy on Boxing Day morning, with some outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Much of the country will hold on to grey skies through Boxing Day morning with rain at times. It will be windy for many, but the winds will gradually ease in the afternoon. And that is how the weather is shaping up tomorrow morning.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good afternoon, or good evening now. I'm Anaya Flaren Iman. Thank you for joining us here on GB News at Christmas. Coming up, a Christmas dilemma. How do you fit in celebrating two birthdays and Christmas all in one day? We'll be speaking to a woman who's doing just that as she shares her birthday with her son on Christmas Day. But first, here's the news with Karen Roberts.
Thank you, Anaya. These are your headlines. An armed intruder has been arrested in the grounds of Windsor Castle, where the Queen is celebrating Christmas. Police say the 19-year-old man didn't enter any buildings and there's no danger to the wider public. Meanwhile, in a moving Christmas Day message, the Queen reflected on the loss of her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. Her Majesty said after the death of her beloved Prince Philip in April, she's drawn great comfort from the warmth and affection in tributes from the country, the Commonwealth and around the world.
His sense of service, intellectual curiosity and capacity to squeeze fun out of any situation were all irrepressible. That mischievous, inquiring twinkle was as bright at the end as when I first set eyes on him. But life, of course, consists of final partings as well as first meetings. And as much as I and my family miss him, I know he would want us to enjoy Christmas.
Government scientific advisers say deaths from COVID could be reduced by up to 54% if new restrictions are introduced in the next few days. A new paper models the impact of banning indoor socialising and returning to the rule of 6 outdoors. It suggests the measures should run from the 28th of December through to late March. Ministers are expected to make a decision on new restrictions in the next few days. Meanwhile, people have been queuing for vaccines, with staff and volunteers giving up their festive holidays for the Jingle Jab campaign. The booster programme comes as COVID cases continue to climb. Daily infections hit a record 122,000 yesterday. Vaccines will also be administered on Boxing Day. The world's most powerful telescope has been launched into space.
And liftoff.
Costing around £7 billion, the James Webb Space Telescope is 100 times more sensitive than its predecessor, the Hubble. Scientists believe the quest will transform our understanding of the universe. The telescope's expected to scan different life forms and will look further back in time than ever before.
This telescope that is now going to take us back in time. It's a time machine. It's going to take us back to the very beginnings of the universe.
After almost 100 days of activity, La Palma's volcano eruption has officially been declared over. It suddenly went quiet on December the 13th, but authorities held off giving the all clear until today to avoid raising false hope. Some 3,000 properties were destroyed, and lava now covers the equivalent of around 1,500 football pitches. Well, that's your news update. I'll be back with more headlines at the top of the hour. Now back to Anaya.
We all know the origins of Christmas being a celebration of the birth of the baby Jesus. What if you were born on this big day too? Do you have a split celebration? How do you celebrate? And to add that, imagine sharing your birthday with your son. I'm joined now by behavioural psychologist Joe Hemmings, whose birthday is today. Happy birthday, Joe. It's also your son's birthday, so happy birthday to him too. I mean, how do you celebrate Christmas? I mean, what do you do having three important days on the same day?
Merry Christmas, and before I go on. How did we do it? Well, we used to do it. The tradition was that we had Christmas in the morning, and then we'd have a sort of lunch, and then we'd have birthday in the afternoon. But it's sort of got a bit muddled up. So the only things we really do are make sure that birthday presents are wrapped in birthday paper. So I'm trying to get my son to follow the tradition that my parents taught me, which is very much separate the day into two halves so you didn't feel left out in any way because you had your birthday on Christmas Day. Then, of course, my timing was so bad, I did the same again. I think actually I've convinced Matthew to think that we're quite special being born on this day, that there aren't many of us, and to be born on the same day as your mum as well as Christmas Day means that everybody's celebrating, everybody's off work, everybody's hopefully in a good mood. So kind of, yeah, you almost get to the point where you think, what other day would you like your birthday to be on? I mean, a random day, like, sorry to all those people, but, you know, the 10th of July or 15th of October. No, you have it on a real day when everybody's celebrating.
I mean, how does birthday presents work then? I mean, do you have double presents, or do you just have one big present, or is it just amalgamated into one?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. When I was little, I used to write to Santa. I used to have to explain that, like, just so he knew that I did have a birthday as well, that I didn't only wanted two presents. In real life, it doesn't really always pan out like that. So I think most of my friends, my son's friends, probably got around to the idea of giving us separate presents, but some people still will go happy birthday and Christmas. And there is a little bit of a sense that that's a cop-out. You know, you wouldn't do that if your birthday was in June.
I mean, so how do parties work as well? I mean, do you actually have it on the same day? Because usually people are spending Christmas with their families. Yeah. I mean, so do you have it before or after? I
sort of think you don't really have parties. The problem is, I think if you have a party after Christmas, it feels like it's already been. And if you're trying to have a party before Christmas, it's all very Christmas themed. You have to explain, like if you're going out somewhere, that we don't want crackers, you know, it's not a Christmas party. And then I always wanted to, but it's way too late now, to sort of do that thing in June and have a June party. But I haven't worked out whether you do it 6 months after your birthday or kind of like a year and a half after it. So do you get two birthdays in 1 year, or do you skip one? So in the end, that was too bewildering. So just don't have a party at all.
Yeah, I mean, how does it feel celebrating your birthday with your son? I mean, that is quite a coincidence. I mean, that's such a random thing to share. I mean, that must be a really interesting feeling.
Yeah, it's quite special. I think that's something a bomb will always have. I suppose if I was really a bit cynical, being divorced, I always had my son over Christmas because it was my birthday, and my ex-husband would have the children over New Year. So sometimes people swap it around, But because it was my birthday, I always got New Year's off and always had my son with my birthday. So that was a plus point. It sort of feels normal. I mean, it didn't feel normal going to hospital and giving birth. When I went on my birthday to give birth, I was the first one in the hospital, I think about 9 a.m. They had a special crib all decorated in lace. They said, oh, you'll be the first mum to give birth. In fact, I was the last one. So I spent a great deal of that day not giving birth, but finally I did. Yeah, I sort of suppose it's a bond. I think for any mum born on the same day as their child, there's always some uncanny special bond between you.
Yeah, I mean, now to the psychology of Christmas. I mean, is 8 o'clock, so we've just gone after 8 now. Is this finally the time to de-stress?
I think so. I think if there's anything like our house, the rows will have been had. The errors will have been made. For example, I cooked a fabulous turkey, but the giblets and the neck were still in a plastic bag inside. There's usually a disaster of some sort, but they're generally away by now. You know, any drunken relatives have nodded off. I think that at this point we're all sort of chilled. And I hope for most people that the pressure of the day will have eased off, and now is a time when they can, whatever's happened during the day, good or bad, they can just chill out and go, yeah, you know, it's my time now.
Yeah, I mean, on that same point, is Christmas really a time for joy? I mean, all of the arrangements, all of the presents, you know, all of those things. I mean, is it really a time for joy, or would you say it's more of a time of stress overall?
Well, I'd like it to be a time of joy. It becomes stressful because people often have quite unrealistic expectations of the big day, that it's got to be perfect, it's got to look like a TV ad, that all the children can be well behaved, all the food's going to be perfect and gleaming and coming out at the right time. You know, life isn't like that. So I think if you setting ourselves unrealistic expectations, there's only one way to go from there. So I think you accept that the most important thing is being together. As a family, and this one has been very difficult this Christmas. I mean, last year was tough. So if you've managed to get any of your family together this year, well done. As long as you're fed, it doesn't really matter. Nothing else matters. The togetherness, the fact we've got through this far. I mean, really, this should be, of all years, the year you don't put pressure on yourself to create, you know, a spectacular telly La La Land looking Christmas dinner, because I hope we've got to the point where we understand what's really valuable, and it's not that everything runs 100% smoothly. In fact, it's rather good if it doesn't, because that represents normal Christmas.
And finally, Jo, I mean, who gets to blow out the candles, you or your son?
Okay, well, we both see there was a bit of an accident this year where the delivery service didn't deliver us a birthday cake. So we don't have a birthday cake, but the other son, who's not born on Christmas Day, bought 2 mini Christmas cakes. So we're going to now, when I've done this, go and each have a small cake with a candle on it and blow it out now. So we both generally take turns, or this year we've got 2 separate cakes. So yeah, it's shared.
Fantastic. Well, Merry Christmas and happy birthday to you and your son, Jo Hemmings.
Thank you so much, and Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you. Jo Hemmings, psychologist. Well, the Northern Ireland Children to Lapland Trust makes children's dreams come true, flying over 100 children a year to Lapland to give them a magical experience of meeting Santa Claus, sleigh rides and much, much more. Our reporter Douglas Beattie has been taking a look.
Oh, Frosty the snowman was alive as he could be, and the children say he'd laugh and play just the same as you and me.
We have all cursed the restrictions of a COVID Christmas, and just how it curtails our plans. But spare a thought for those who may not see another.
The Northern Ireland Children to Lapland Trust was formed 12 years ago, and for the past 12 years, well, in effect for the past 10 years, we've been taking a plane full of Northern Ireland children up to see Santa Claus up in Lapland. I say only 10 out of the 12 because last year and this year, I'm afraid COVID has affected us very badly indeed. It meant that last year we just couldn't travel to Lapland. It wasn't feasible to take over 100 children, seriously ill children, some terminally ill, to a very cold Lapland.
The innocence of the children's dreams were being brought to life on a flight to the Arctic Circle to see Santa.
Jingle bells, jingle bells, jingle all
For those non-believers, the magic of Lapland is hard to deny. Brought by huskies, skidoos and yes, reindeers to an underground kingdom where ice sculptures, elves and train rides existed. The families of these seriously and terminally ill children shared an experience never to be forgotten.
It's been about mega memories for the three of them, the three children, so it has, and it's been absolutely amazing. It's like something out of a storybook.
Great, it's great to see all the wee ones, you know, isn't it? Getting to see Santa Claus, wasn't it? Yeah. Good boy. Thanks.
For the past 2 years, this charity has only been able to deliver presents to the children who have had a struggle that most of us couldn't even imagine.
We got all the 110 kids that we were to bring. We got their names and addresses from all the health trusts, and we got them presents to the value of £200, and we distributed those to all the kids in their homes in the week before Christmas. We also get letters from Santa Claus and a video from Santa Claus individually to each of their homes.
I wish it could be like this every day about again.
Back in Lapland, there were gifts aplenty. The magic of the day and excitement in everyone's eyes was a gift that would never, ever fade. The charity is so eager to return to its dream-making flights and realises it brings much more to these children than the experience of the day.
We sometimes take these things for granted, and sometimes the feedback that we get really hits home. We had one letter from a mother and said how much it meant to her daughter to be singled out for this, but not only her daughter, the brothers and sisters, the aunts, the uncles, the grannies, their school friends, the whole community took great pride and joy in the fact that this little girl was going to Lapland, and she said it gave her confidence such a boost. And we maybe sometimes don't recognise just how much of an impact it can make.
As this very special Christmas flight kissed the Irish skyline on its homeward journey, it occurred to me that there were two very different emotions on board. Those of the parents who had made precious memories, and those of the children who had had their dreams come true. Douglas Beattie, GB News, Belfast.
Thank you so much for joining me this evening, and I'm Florian Iman. We'll be back after the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking rather grey with outbreaks of rain in places. Let's now take a look at the details. It will be a grey and gloomy start in the southwest, with some heavy showers at first on Boxing Day. Later on, it should turn drier and brighter in the afternoon. It will also be a grey and misty start in the southeast of England, with some outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Rain will be particularly heavy across East Anglia in the morning. Western parts of Wales will begin rather wet, with heavy and persistent rain in the morning. It will be a mild day, with temperatures starting the day in high single figures. Grey skies will also spread into northwest England, with outbreaks of rain, but snow will fall across the Pennine. A yellow snow warning is in force until midday, with strong winds too. Snow will fall across the Yorkshire Dales as well, and perhaps to lower levels for a time in the morning, giving some tricky driving conditions. Rain and hill snow will spread into southern Scotland through the morning, but it will be a dry, bright and frosty start in northern Scotland. After a wet Christmas Day in Northern Ireland, skies will still be cloudy on Boxing Day morning, with some outbreaks of rain and drizzle. Much of the country will hold on to grey skies through Boxing Day morning, with rain at times. It will be windy for many, but the winds will gradually ease in the afternoon. And that is how the weather is shaping up tomorrow morning.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage. I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Hello. Since I started this show earlier this year at the launch of GB News, I've welcomed a host of newsmakers from the worlds of politics, showbiz and sport for an interview with a difference, where they get to let loose in a way no other channel will allow, and you get to ask the questions you really want answered. Here's what happened when the likes of Thomas Markle, Roger Daltrey, Don McLean and Sarah Palin sat down for the big question. We always like welcoming a legend, especially an outspoken one. In the slightly wild early days of the GB News launch, The Who's lead singer Roger Daltrey joined me to give his perfect take on woke culture, including how today's youth don't seem to enjoy themselves, but rather seem to look for reasons to be offended. Look, speaking of young people, Roger, in a different sense, you have been a critic of woke culture, as am I. And interestingly, you think that the younger generations could actually be stifling themselves creatively. You've said it's terrifying, the miserable world they're going to create for themselves. I mean, anyone who's lived a life and you see what they're doing, you just know that it's a route to nowhere. Explain a little bit what you meant by that in terms of woke culture today.
You know, well, I just feel, where's humour? Well, they've forgotten about humour. If you're going to micromanage every emotion you ever have, and you're, live in fear of upsetting someone, of being objectionable, we all have the right to